Good morning, everybody. Also from my side, my name is Maria Sangiuliano from Smart Venice. I had the honor and the pleasure of being scientific coordinator of the CALIPER consortium and really accompanying our partners in this amazing journey towards inclusive gender equality plans, design and implementation. I'm also part of several other projects on gender in research and politics, such as FEARS, but also the BIAS project on gender and race bias in artificial intelligence, and a new JEP project recently started that is Nexus. The panel we are going to have now is focusing on intersectionality. Several of the issues were already mentioned during the previous session, and this is a very nice transitioning. And it's really an important topic that we want to discuss because whenever we refer to intersectionality and its importance, we have this feedback that, oh yeah, what is this theory about? What is this new theoretical framework or top-down policy that is sort of coming from the European institutions? But is it really relevant? Is it really evidence-based? Well, it is evidence-based. There are European surveys from the Fundamental Rights Agency that showed how 29% of people in the European Union had experienced discrimination searching for work, with 50% of them mentioning skin color or physical appearance as a factor. Again, 26% of participants to this EU-level survey stated that they have to hide sexual orientation or gender identity at work. And these rates are really higher than for trans and intersex respondents. So are universities really, let's say, out of this picture? Yesterday, I was attending the UNICEF conference, final conference, and they had an amazing survey where they showed how the prevalence of gender-based violence cases is much higher for people in precarious working conditions, so people with non-heteronormative gender identities, and women of colors as well, and women with disabilities. So our statement here is that European universities and research organizations are not immune from these intersected discriminations and challenges, where patriarchal society is really also showing its racist, homophobic and transphobic and classist features. So these are the topics that we want to discuss here with our amazing panels, panelists, revolving around the key question on how to then really translate this approach into practical and operational actions within gender equality plans and measures. We will discuss these issues here with our great panelists, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Victoria Showunmi, she's Associate Professor at the University College of London. Victoria has developed really national and international reputation for her academic work on gender identity and race in the context of leadership. The implications for learners and educators, and young Black women's experiences of education and their well-being. She has been the principal and co-principal investigator in several research projects with this angle, specific angle, and she is also an international visiting scholar working with universities in Europe and beyond. So we are really pleased to have you, Victoria. Then our other panelist is Allison Kenneally, and my presentation is saying Goodbye. Well, Allison comes from Trinity College in Dublin. No?
I can do my own introduction if you like. That's fine.
No,
no.
Yeah, I have it here. So, an experienced higher education leader and academic as well. Her research interests focus on EDI, change management and system reconfiguration in higher education. She's Vice President for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at my bad Southeast Technological University. And her university received the 2023 Inclusive Gender Equality Champions Award by the European Commission that we have heard previously from Ampepan speech as well. Our third panelist is Tiago Botelho. Tiago comes from Barcelona. Since 2019, is the president of PRISMA, an association that is working on defending and promoting LGBTQI+ rights in science, technology, and innovation. In particular, therefore, working with scientific and technological innovation institutions. The interesting thing is that PRISMA defines itself as a feminist and anti-racist association. So promoting intersectional alliances, and we would like to know more about these, of course. They recently published practical guidelines on LGBTQI+ inclusion for STEM institutions that we also promoted within and disseminated and used, productively used within the CALIPER consortium. Tiago is also working at IRB Barcelona, that is one of our CALIPER project partners by accident. So thanks again, and I would start straight away with my questions to Victoria. So we will have 3 rounds of short speeches by each one of our panelists to start with. So Victoria, here we are. We know that the debate on intersectionality started really as a challenge from Black and queer feminist activists towards a mainstream and universalistic approach coming from white feminism, and that those challenges had to be taken on board by white feminism. But as of today, because this started back in the 70s and 80s already, so sometimes we really think intersectionality is a new thing, but no, it's not. It has a long history. But where do we stand as of today in terms of ensuring Black women access to research career and to foster their access to leadership positions as well? And also how the existing gaps are actually challenging the way higher education and research institutions work, and what should structurally change? Very easy questions.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Maria. And also thank you for inviting me. And I know that we're on a very tight time speed, whatever, so I'll do as fast as I can, but at the same time I want to make sure you've got some takeaway notes from what I'm going to say. So a really good question which you're asking me there, and what I want to start with just very briefly is some data. So I'm looking at UK, so I'm looking at the United Kingdom. That's where I'm based. I'm associate professor there at UCL, University College London. So if I look at the data across the UK, there are 18,710 white professors across the whole of the United Kingdom, right? So out of when we then look at the next lot of figures, and you might think, well, you know, the United Kingdom is actually quite a diverse place. Well, it's 85% which is white anyway. So we've got 18,710 which are white professors. You have 1,580 which are Asian professors, and Asian meaning South Asian and East Asian. And then you've got 160, which are African, Caribbean, diaspora professors, 160. Let me just very quickly tell you about UCL, University College London. So 8,600 academics, and academics equal research, teaching contracts, and also a traditional academic contract, 8,600. Out of those, we have 23 which are associate professors and full professors in the whole of UCL. If you want to make the figures slightly higher, they can become 57 if you include people on teaching contracts and also research contracts. That equals 57 out of 8,600. So I thought I'd just give you that little bit. Moving on to the challenges. So the challenges: isolation, marginalization, brought about by the constant challenges to their status, authority, and scholarship. Black women are double outsiders who are subjected to both racism and sexism. I was very much engaged with what was going on earlier in the panel, and I was desperate to ask some questions, even with this morning, because we are not separate people. Racism and sexism is part of who we are, right? On top of that, systemic racism, intersectional, and also microaggressions. It is very much like a snakes and ladders. You go up the ladder and down the snake, or down the snake and up the ladder, as a bit like our careers. We also be seen as a pet. Everybody wants to be your threat. They all want you to be a pet. They want you to come to their university. They want you to speak. They want you to be part of their academy. But when you come into the academy as a pet has certain things. They want to tolerate you. You quickly become a threat because all of a sudden you're challenging the status quo. So a threat means you lose your job. You also have to ask the questions like this: why can I not be given some grace? When a white woman makes a mistake, it is seen as a learning moment, a learning development moment. When a black woman makes a mistake, they are fired. The pay gap. Now, the pay gap's based on gender equality. Well, what about me as a black woman? What about my money? Oh, I need to go to the race aspect, but that's actually looking at black men. We're at the bottom of the pay gap within the UK, the bottom of the pay gap. Lack of progress. Well, always one thing. So you get to, oh yes, I'm going to put your application in for full professor. And you have, oh, there's just one more thing you have to do. There's just one more thing you have to do. And when you look at the application internationally, when they look at it, they say this doesn't make sense. There was a colleague who was in Oxford, and they kept overriding her application for professor. She took them to court. They should have made a professor 12 years prior to her becoming a professor, a full professor, 12 years prior, right? And this is real stories. Underrepresentation in academic priorities, and what that actually means. And also you speak about the glass ceiling. Let's talk about the concrete ceiling. Ours is not glass, it's absolutely concrete. And trying to shatter that is not very easy. And as I said, it's like snakes and ladders. Now I know Maria's looking at me, but I've only got a couple more minutes.
Oh, you have.
I'm just finishing.
You can continue.
All right. So, so the other part of the question, which Maria was asking, how the existing gaps to challenge the way HEIs and research assists work, what should structurally change? Well, I've said one of the things is around lack of representation. So what do we need to do? We need to have more. The process and policies are very sophisticated. They're very sophisticated and very disingenuous because they will point to the policy and the process and say the policy's over there and there's the process. We cannot be doing discrimination in this university because we've got so many policies and processes. We've got it all stitched up. Also, you need to have mandatory face-to-face equity training for all leaders and managers, not online. but stuff where it challenges people, right? It's a bit more uncomfortable. Action. Well, the implementation of research findings. There are so many research projects, but how are they implemented? And who's implementing them to make change happen? Draw on work outside of the higher education. Many private sector organisations are doing some fantastic work, really, really good work. Mentors with the right reason is really important. Really do that. And also unpack. So when we look at the pet to threat, unpack the queen bee syndrome. Because many of us go into an establishment and there's already a queen bee. And I might be saying to them, oh, well, you know, here I am coming to do the work around X, but they're the queen bee because they're the gender specialists. But hey, hang on a moment, you need to move over because I'm also doing that. And I'm looking at you and I've just got 1 more minute. What needs to be changed, understood and acknowledged is difference in all forms. That black women are not a game of chess, as Kiki was saying earlier, all right? They're not a game of chess. And also, just because we're not seen as the model minority, that's important to understand what we're saying there as well. The recognition, and the last point I'm going to make, there needs to be recognition for our emotional labour and what that actually means. The other bits I'll do on the next conversation. Am I okay with time?
Perfect, in time, on time. Thank
Fantastic.
you, Victoria.
Oh, and the last point I want to make, as I've got 1 second, is more and more, and I don't know what it's like across Europe, but I know what it's like within the UK, and I know what it's like in other parts of the world. You hear this notion of, you're not the right fit. You're not the right fit. Well, what does that mean? Is it that we see us as a homogenous group of marginalised women, and if we don't fit that because it's not in your mind, when you're with your own biases, that we need to be a certain type of person, then we're not the right fit, and you become the pet who's been threatened and you've completely left your job. So that's what I wanted to say. Hope that's helpful for all of you, and we can come back to the conversation.
Sure. Thanks again, Victoria. I really bring with me this metaphor of the concrete ceiling and the lack of transparency within policies and institutions as well, but also this call to the emotional labor that is experienced by women with minority backgrounds. And it calls back to the previous panel on the relevance and importance of caring into research institutions as an approach. So I would then move forward to Allison. So my question to you, bring us a bit back to the policy level and the gender equality plans in particular. We see that a common challenge that many research and innovation institutions face when they try to start with putting in place an intersectional approach to gender equality policies is really that, it's the data collection part of the challenge, the lack of evidence. So my question would be, based on your inclusive gender equality plan that was awarded as a champion as well, on which evidence did you rely in terms of internal data? Which specific actions did you implement? And how did you manage to integrate the gender equality plan with the broader equality, diversity, and inclusion policies, and which were the challenges at that point?
Thanks, Maria. A lot of questions there, and I'll try to unpack some of that. And just to say, I think it's wonderful to be here in a room where everybody is on a similar journey. We might be at different stages of our journey in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion, but I think the point has been really well made by Victoria there in relation to gender equality. It's impossible to isolate gender equality from the wider equality work that we do, or that we can do, or we will do. You know, it's impossible to do that. So while we all, and certainly we started out in SETU working on gender equality initiatives 7 years ago in an intentional way. I suppose there was some work going on before that, but that was when we really kicked off and resourced and planned intentionally in relation to gender equality. And we started out looking at women in STEM. Okay, and that's kind of typically the start of a lot of journeys that we've all been on. And then we broadened our focus to women in academia. Then we broadened our focus to women not only in academia, but all of our professional and support services staff and our technical members of staff and all the other women in our university who enable us to do our work as academics or leaders or whatever it is. So we looked at women in leadership and ensuring more women went into senior positions and succeeded a lot in that. We looked at gender balance on key decision-making boards, executive governing body, succeeded in doing a lot of that. But we kind of realised, I suppose, midway through our journey, I think we had a real awakening when we kind of looked at our data, as you said, and we could see that, yes, we were making progress, but we were only measuring one thing. So we were measuring, you know, men and women in our organisation, and we were missing a big part of the picture is what we really realised. So we made a conscious effort at that stage to start to try to collect more data around the other intersecting grounds. Okay, so looking at things around race and ethnicity and disability and other grounds. It's hugely challenging, I'm not going to lie to you. You know, it was difficult enough to get data on gender systemised in the university, and we collect that routinely when people apply for roles, so we can look at data on recruitment or selection, and we have data on all of our staff by gender. But we don't have it, or we didn't have it at the other grounds. So we took a two-pronged approach. So one was we asked staff to voluntarily disclose data on things like race and ethnicity, things around, for example, we broadened our concept of gender, so it's not just male and female, we've moved beyond the binary there. We asked staff to disclose information around disability and so on. We've low levels of success with that, I'm not going to lie. So relatively, I think about 26% of our staff have disclosed that data to us on a voluntary basis. But it requires a lot of trust in your organisation. So the second approach to getting the data that we used was to kind of let go of our hang-up of having metrics and quantitative data to measure everything. As someone said earlier on, it's not always measurable like that. And we started to rely much more on qualitative data that was coming to us and that we knew about in our EDI office from groups that are networks that we had set up in the university. So we have an LGBTQ+ staff network. You know, we have a student LGBT network, we have a staff disability network, we have race equality forum, and the voices of people with real lived experiences were coming to us in a very kind of ad hoc way, in a qualitative way, but in a way that enabled us to know what the issues were in the university. So we relied a lot on the qualitative data, to be honest, you know, for that intersectional piece. And some of the actions that would have come out of that, certainly, okay, one example of our views, quantitative data would have been through our, we saw that a lot of our staff who responded, female staff who responded to a survey, who were carers and who were also women, they had a particularly high level of feeling that they wouldn't or couldn't apply for promotional opportunities, that their caring commitments were incompatible with, you know, promotion or success in the university. And we know that care is one of, you know, caring responsibilities is a hugely gendered issue and contributes to the gender pay gap. So we took an approach to set up with an external group, and I think Kiki made the point earlier on about relying on external engagement. That's been really important for us. So we set up a family carers initiative called Caring Employers Initiative in the university. So we set up a network for carers. We asked them what could we do to support them. And we roll out things like training. We do training for the management, which is really, really important. Like lots of our staff wouldn't even tell their manager that they were actually caring for maybe, you know, an older parent or a child with disabilities, whatever it was. They wouldn't even disclose that because they were afraid of the impact that would have on their career. That really shocked me at the time. So we did lots of training, awareness. We have tailored one-on-one plans for people because we know that people in crisis can often leave the workplace, you know, if they're in a caring situation. So we've tried to put in supports for those, and we can work out an individual plan with them, as well as training and information sessions. Just one example. Another would have been around our LGBTQ+ inclusion. So again, we knew from dealing with students in particular, we were seeing more students coming to the office asking about how could they change their gender, or they didn't identify as male or female, they were non-binary, and how could we maybe support them, or could we do anything to help? So we knew we really had to do something in that area, and that's led us to really rethink our whole work around gender equality. And that's why we always use the word inclusive gender equality, because it's about so much more than just men and women. So we set up, we changed we have an internal policy now to allow students to change their gender, to provide them with other supports. So if they're getting any medical treatment, or they may need support through counselling. Like as you said earlier, the statistics are shocking for our LGBTQ+ staff and students in terms of the bullying, the discrimination, incidents of sexual harassment, mental health issues, really, really concerning. So look, I suppose we try to implement it through change through policy. Again, training, a huge amount of training for staff. People were afraid, people are always afraid about, especially around transgender, non-binary, kind of language, terminology, what to do, what to say. So we did a lot of training around that area. We also led a national project in the university with 5 other universities in Ireland that was funded for us. And that was hugely impactful. Like, we were able to roll out training to over 800 people across the sector, including all the leadership in our universities. So they've all done training in this area. And also we've set up a national network. And at the moment we're just finalising, I hope, an online training programme for all of our students. So that when first year students come into the university as part of the orientation, they will also take just a 30-minute, very short training piece, but just to make it very clear to them that, we don't tolerate discrimination in this area, and I suppose where they can go for supports if they need it. And one final point then, just around your question about how do we integrate our wider EDI policy with our gender equality plan. So we would see our university EDI policy as being the very high level overarching policy. It has very kind of like high level goals and deals with all of the equality grounds, okay? And it sets out kind of a framework then. Whereas our gender equality action plan to us, that is the very operational plan. So we see that as a way of achieving inclusive gender equality under our gender equality policy, or under our EDI policy. So we have this wide EDI policy that covers race, ethnicity, LGBTQ inclusion, gender, and so on. And then we have the gender equality plan. Now we also have a couple, like we have an action plan to tackle sexual violence and harassment. We're working on a race equality plan as well at the moment. And I'm a little bit conflicted about dividing all of those up, because they're separate plans, and really, people aren't separate parts of people, people are people. So I think something we'll work on in the future is maybe trying to bring our gender equality plan and our race equality plan and our action plan to tackle sexual violence and harassment, to try to bring those into one more coherent plan. So that's back to the journey piece. I think we're always learning, and yeah, thank you. I've learned lots from listening to the people here today as well.
Thanks a lot, Allison. Indeed, you touched upon quite challenging points. I noticed the common emphasis with Victoria on capacity building and training, and this aspect of not ending up with overlapping sort of competing policies that tackle the different discrimination grounds separately. And as Victoria was mentioning, then I am a black woman. Should I then go to the race equality officer? But they probably do not have a gender perspective as well, so either. So these are very concrete challenges. And your reference to external stakeholders and the engagement of external networks, NGOs, service providers is also bridging us to the intervention from Tiago, because with PRISMA as an NGO, we see that the knowledge can be out of the university, but universities and research organizations should really be able and ready to tap into that knowledge and tools that are coming from outside and make good use of it. So my question to you, Tiago, is, yeah, you know that we are aware of the fact that special resistances are met in research institutions when we try to challenge more or less explicit heteronormative practices. And at the same time, there is evidence that, and we learned that from your training actually, that shows how when we have more gender balanced working environments, then those environments tend also to be the most LGBTQI plus inclusive. So how to tackle these barriers, how to size the opportunities for intersectional alliances, and what are the tools and transferable good practices that are there, and how your PRISMA guidelines could support this.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Thank you, Maria, for the invitation, and thank you everybody for the fantastic work that you have been doing in both projects and in other projects I think you are also involved in. So from what we have, I wanted to talk about a bit of gaps that we have in here. We have been talking about the talent gap here, that less people go to STEM disciplines, and I think this has been pretty much devolved, but I think there's also other gaps that are important, like the innovation gap, for instance. We have learned a lot about personalized medicine, for instance, and you know that there are medicines that are made for women, medicines that are made for men, but what happens with, for instance, transgender people, intersex people, that are their lack of presence within these groups that do this research, make that there are this innovation gap that no one thinks about these people. I think it's not because they don't want to think, it's just because it's not there. So there are not enough different points of view as per reducing this innovation gap. And there's a third gap that we have identified in PRISMA, that's called the access, or the innovation gap, the access to innovation gap. That it's very strange because there's this perception, or there's this difficulty of diverse people in order to embrace innovations, and this is very curious because that should be not related with gender or with diversity. I think that if you are a non-normative person, you always have, or most of the people try to get to fit within this norm, and I think this is what causes this access gap, because you are trying to fit the normative way, and you're not trying the other things that are new and that can be innovative. Well, and this to say that we were a group of people, that LGBTQI+ people, that we were all working on science, technology, or innovation areas, and that we decided to start to making something more real, and founded PRISMA. And you are very lucky because you have lots of data, because UK in these areas it's much more advanced than we are, but in Spain we don't have anything. We are now trying to make these surveys on the LGBT situation in STEM institutions, but we still have a long time to do. Another thing that I wanted to say is about the intersectionality and about the thing that I think Allison, what you mentioned about why should we have different taxes and equality in different taxes, because we are people and we cannot we are just one person. We are not 10 different persons that can be tackled from different angles. I think this is very important. I think this, for me, it sounds like obvious, but for many people it's not, and that's why I think that all of these fights, to say the least, are very aligned, and that's one thing that in PRISMA we tried to enforce within these actions that we have developed. So coming back to the actions, so a few years ago we set the 10 guidelines, so 10 actions that are meant to promote diversity and inclusion within the STEM institutions. And in fact, they are very simple because it's nothing very innovative. We just talk about education, about protection, about visibility, that are things that for us it's like having people within the institutions that have training and that trained in order to provide guidance and so on. I think should be a very basic thing, but in fact, I think there is not. And we did this with the CALIPER and LeTSGEPs project. I think this is happening a lot more. And now we are reaching different types of institutions that had no gender equality plans, for instance. Another thing that, although we try to have this intersectional perspective in everything that we do, one of the actions is to promote, especially having this intersectional point of view in all the actions, and I think this is very important. And although it should be intrinsic, many of the times it's forgotten. So one of the things is to focus on this. And just another group of actions specific for transgender people. And this is some simple stuff on avoiding these binary classifications of gender that I think everyone here is quite aware of. But it's one thing that I realized when I got here, like I got my name tag and there was no pronouns. And I think this could be this is something that we shouldn't assume the gender of a person just because as this person looks or because of the name that this person has. But another thing is the support. And you were mentioning, Allison, about having these protocols in order to support gender people within transitioning and so on. And this is one of the actions that we also promote. So once again, it's nothing totally innovative, but it's something that I think it should be remarked and it should be taken into consideration within the gender plans. And about how to proceed with these actions. So in PRISMA, we try to do different things. We are all science based or science trained people, and so things that we try to do is to use this scientific knowledge as per fighting discrimination. And this means that we try to reply, instead of replying to, for instance, I was very angry this morning because there was an interview in one of the Spanish newspapers from the right-wing politician saying that they are now going back within the trans rights in Madrid area. So in Spain we have different, we have the national legislation and then autonomic legislations. And in Madrid they have a right-wing government that is now wants to come back to the previous situations, or maybe even worse. And for instance, instead of reacting, we said this is not well done, because it's not. What we try to do is, from a scientific point of view, to provide scientific evidence with strong references and so on. And one of these examples are the white papers for self-gender determination that we have launched last year. Another thing that, am I still in time? Sorry. Okay, I'll go really fast. Another point of action that I wanted to recall is that we have been working a lot with governments in order to be able to change things from the policy perspective. And we are very proud because we are an association with 4 years old association. And we already were able to ask things for the science law, for LGTB law in Spain, and we got our text within the law, and this is very fulfilling. We asked for this, for having gender trained people within any STEM association, STEM entity. And we also got this and the commissions and so on. And the other thing that we asked was the intersectional perspective in every way. And this was taken across the law, the science law, and it's I think we are very proud of this. And thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tiago. Indeed, very important points. And this reference to the political landscape, it's very important. I believe that when we refer to intersectionality, we really experienced firsthand what Maxime was mentioning earlier, the dimension of political negotiation that this entails actually once you try to advance to this direction. The PRISMA guidelines, I think, are available online. We were really very pleased to support the translation within CALIPER in English. So now they are available to the entire community. Take a look at those. And we wanted now to share briefly some key learning points that we had when trying to embed an intersectional approach into the GEPs within CALIPER. And I will then give the floor back to our panelists for 2 minutes more reflections based on this, and then we will open the Q&A, inviting the CALIPER partners to also to interact if possible. I hope you will bear with us until 1, right? And you can wait a bit longer before our lunch break. So in CALIPER, I would say that all of the GEPs teams, the change agents within the projects were really motivated towards this effort, going beyond a binary definition of gender equality. At the initial stages of the project, we worked strategically in several different ways. First and foremost, we integrated an intersectional perspective into the capacity building program for the change agents. For some of them, it was really the very first time this was raised, but gradually we built a common understanding and a commitment. And then we encouraged partners, of course, to provide evidence to their leadership structures, and if there was no other possibility, to start by improving data collection procedures, and start trying to negotiate for a change in data collection so that intersectionally disaggregated data could be made available. Some of the partners actually went to this direction. Our partners from Georgia, the Shota Rustaveli National Science Foundations, and also the National Technical University of Athens, included specific actions in their GEPs, and started data collection and reporting systems using a gender plus disaggregated approach, even though some of the inequality grounds were more easily to be integrated than others. And indeed, this is something to be taken into account. In particular, we got the awareness that when it comes to age, when it comes to socioeconomic status and class, there might be more availability to incorporate this approach, but other discrimination grounds like LGBTQ+I and race, so sexual orientation, gender identity, and race are much more contentious politically. We met a lot of resistances, the partners met a lot of resistances, and they were very brave into navigating this negotiation terrain. And the resistances came both from internal stakeholders and the external context and the political landscape, mostly also in connection with the increased role of anti-gender discourses and the political actors in the different countries. So in spite of all this, we managed to have some promising practices and good practices. In Romania, for example, the National Funding Agency for Research and Innovation released an information kit on recruitment and selection, and they managed to integrate, beside gender, also recommendations that tackle the intersections with gender, age, physical appearance, and ethnicity. They also released guidelines on inclusive language with a bold opening quote that was very nice in the introduction of the document from Brené Brown, and her call to go for courage over comfort, and explicitly framing gender prejudices within broader heteronormative, racist, homophobic cultures. And also the guidelines of the glossary of the guidelines was providing that more specific and more nuanced understanding of gender. At IRB in Barcelona, the Institute for Biomedical Research, where also Tiago works, they worked through inclusive language training with sessions that were developed by a feminist cooperative, and members from the Equality Commissions, the Human Resources Departments, and Fundraising and Communication and Marketing Department participated. And this training was on gender, diversity, and intersectionality in language use. They also promoted guidelines on inclusive language in a network with many other institutes in Catalonia. Our Italian partners, the University of Salento, they set up in the JEP an alias career. That is a measure adopted to favor gender transitioning students who need to use a name of choice when they are enrolled in the university. That is different from their registered name, as an expression of self-identification, and Unisalento was successful in that sense. So these are at large and really in brief the step forwards that we made in CALIPER in this effort towards inclusiveness. As I mentioned, it didn't come without pain, so to speak. It was a lot to work on, and not easy at all. So I would also, considering this input and what you have heard from each other, I would like to go back to our panelists with very short final statements that could be oriented towards really looking ahead. What should be done next? What priorities? What directions of work? What policy advancements we would need? Victoria, please.
Okay. Can you still hear me? All right. Okay. I know very, very quickly. So I think you need to continue the journey, and what that looks like is have those brave conversations and difficult conversations, and feel uncomfortable. And I say that because it's all very nice to do it nicely. It's already nice to do it and get your promotion and get additional money on the back of equality. The other thing I would also say is around leadership. You need to think about leadership as inclusive leadership. And how are you making leadership to be inclusive? What is going on with the leaders? Are they actually being trained? Are they being developed to understand difference? Because you may be developed in this room, but when you then they hire somebody who looks like me to work with all of you, the people in the room may not be ready for somebody like me to be your leader. So then you've got another lot of anxiety and discussion to deal with, which you haven't spoken about. So that's why you need the brave conversations. And the last point I would say, within the 3 minutes I have, is that as we continue to do that, look outside of the box. So if you concentrate, which is perhaps the ones which you feel that you can concentrate on more, don't forget, if you think about disability, what about the question about race and disability? Where's that voice? If you think about LGBTQ+, what about race and LGBTQ+? Where's the voice of race? When you think about age and age-related, what's going on with ageism? What's happening with that? And I think those aspects need to be included. And as Maria said, and as my colleague said, yes, it's very difficult and it's very uncomfortable and it's very stressful, but you chose to be in this and your university or establishment decided to sign up to a gender equality. So I keep saying, keep doing the work. It's a lonely job, but you just keep doing what you need to do. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Victoria. Allison, please.
I second everything Victoria said, but also to say, like, it is hard work. It is challenging. I think any work around inclusive gender equality, especially when you start to look into the intersectional parts, sometimes it's easier to talk about women, you know, and women, equality for women. But then when you start talking about racism and ableism and transphobia and all these other topics, it becomes much more difficult. I think with the evolving political situation in different countries as well, it's very challenging. We see lots of misinformation campaigns online, in particular targeted at minority groups as well. So I don't know, my message really, I suppose, is just to, I always remember when times get tough, and you know, we have tough days, we have bad days, we have days when we get picked apart for different things that we've tried to do, where we get horrible emails sent into us, where we get unwanted media attention. All of this comes with the work that we have to do. And I always just kind of bring it back to, like, universities trying to be agents for the common good and to, I suppose, support society with social change. And I think now more than ever we need to be doing that. And I think by working, well, we get great support from our other universities and partners in Ireland and in Europe. And I think by working collectively, it can really support us in our work.
Thank you. So emphasizing this broader role of universities in contributing to societal change. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to be the last one because everything seems like that has been said. No, I would just want to say to support, always remember to have diverse teams. I think it's very, very important because someone might have a different point of view, and I think this is enrichable. And yeah, it's true. It's sometimes we feel like we are fighting alone, but there are many people fighting alone by themselves, and it's much better if we do it together.
Indeed.
And I think this is key for in all the aspects, race, gender, well, everything that's disabilities. I think it only adds up, and you have a fantastic synergy. Thank you very much.
Indeed, thanks, Tiago. I think that yeah, this call that came from the three of you, keep posing the uncomfortable questions. Keep looking at who is missing in the picture, and do not work alone, but search for alliances, even if this is not easy at all. But these are not really competing agendas. Sometimes there is this, you know, debate about, all right, if we now create more space for certain minority grounds agendas, then what will it happen to gender equality? Will it lose ground? You keep hearing this type of concerns as well. But I really believe we need to overcome this perception that this is there is competition between the different inequality grounds, and work throughout intersectional alliances as much as possible. So I'm now opening the floor to some questions, inputs. I would encourage in particular the CALIPER partners who managed to introduce some actions on intersectionality within the GEPs to take the floor.
Okay, thank you to all for your interventions. Have been very interesting. I have a question and also like a reflection. The question is that you have. Can
you introduce yourself for a moment?
Yes, sorry. I am Martina from IRB, and I am in the Equality Committee in the IRB also. And well, the question is that you have talked about the lack of data, and I am thinking about the difficulty of getting all this data, because sometimes I don't know, it's difficult to ask people some things that are that maybe you are asking very personal things, no? In some cases. And the reflection is about language and communication, because what we worked a lot in IRB is about inclusive communication. We in these guidelines were on not only inclusive language, also we gathered recommendations about inclusive communication. So also taking into account images, use of images, and these kind of resources. And we will have these guidelines in Catalan and in English shortly. It's not published yet, but it will be published shortly and briefly. And also a question about that, the use of language, and when you are talking with someone, that sometimes you need to ask how they or she or he want to be
addressed.
Addressed in several aspects. It happened to me recently in a science communication conference that a panelist was an autistic person, and in Spanish we say autistic or person with autism, and I needed to ask her how she wanted to be addressed. And this is interesting, but also sometimes is like you are invading, no? I don't know. I just give you.
Thank you. Who would like to? Thank you very much, Martina. We also have 2 more questions. Shall we? Do you agree if we take the 3 questions that we have and then you answer?
Hi.
Maria Flori.
Hi, yes.
From National Technical University in Athens.
Good morning, everybody. We have a question for the panel. As mentioned before, we also have some data collection process for intersectionality. And but the thing is that maybe now we need to make a next step, and apart from collecting data that sometimes might be a little less useful, we need to start encouraging our students to build communities, because right now we have no communities based on inequalities or in gender, or we only have scientific communities. And my question is, how do you encourage students to do this? Because it might be a difficult process. It might be a process of them coming out as well. So it's a bit, we are really interested to see how we can encourage this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Maria. Very relevant question. And we had, I saw Anna Maria, Cherubini from the University of Salento asking to take the floor. The microphone is getting there.
Thank you. So this is not a question, it's just to add something to what Maria was saying about the alias career we proposed and was approved in Unisalento, and which is actually truly intrinsically non-binary, because as you may know, alias career is for transgender students. So the classical one is they ask to be recognized by a new name. So there is a whole process, a whole administrative process going on to recognize exams, etc., because the Italian law doesn't have provisions for that. So actually you have to close a gap in this. And what we proposed, and we are trying to have it implemented by Cineca. Cineca is the firm providing software administrative software for Italian universities is to bypass this stage of the name. So students can use whatever name they prefer, but on the electronic badge they are using at university, so they are using not the national ID card, but the electronic badge. There will be only the surname and the what do you call it, the number, so the university number, which they are registered, and which means they are not tied to a particular choice of name. They can choose their own name, and this won't affect their university career and the outside services that are provided. So, for example, the travel card for buses or whatever is used for, or the access to libraries. So this was I just wanted to add this because we think it's quite important. It's sort of a new point of view on the
alias career.
Yeah. And also, it's just a very, very recent new. So the university is revising its statute, and the Director General just told me yesterday that they are doing it with an inclusive language. So it's very new and it's very important for us at Unisalento. This.
Thank you, Anna Maria. So one step forward more. Thanks a lot. Dear panelists, would you like to make final remarks answering to the questions on inclusive communication beyond language and how to engage with students? To wrap up, who would like to?
I'm happy to do the second one.
The students and language.
I could do the first one, so Martina, regarding the. So I want to say that no one should be forced to come out of their closets, being the closet, whatever it is. Usually what we say in PRISMA, because it's one of our actions regarding with the binary classification, what we usually recommend is to, if you want to say your first, my name is Tiago and I use my pronouns of he, him. Of course, this could be a simpler situation than asking someone for because their medical condition and so on. But if you think this is important, because maybe it's not important to refer this within the scenario that you are planning. But if it is important, I would favor to ask. And I think it's better to be embarrassed of asking. Or to put your red face when you are asking, then to having the other person feeling included.
Thank you, Tiago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about what's been said, and we've had some very, very bitter and hostile and fraught discussions across the universities and across society over the last few years, and really even more recently. And I think the student group aspect, I'm very much somebody who invites people from all different communities to come in with the students. And so the students are able to adhere to whichever group they want to adhere to, but at the same time, understand how that is when we're looking at sociology, philosophy, etc. And so I think it also starts with what kind of speakers you have, and what kind of people how diverse is your actual organisation, your university. Because if it is all white faces, and you're expecting as all white faces to start to go and get involved with a discussion with the only black student, they're not going to be wanting to be in a group, because which group are they going to belong to? And if it's an only black student who's also gay and Muslim, you're also going to have an issue, because that student's all on their own. So I think those types of things, you have to look at what's going on in the organisation. But if you invite outside speakers to come into the organisation, that then hopes to bring people from across the university to come to. So it won't be just in your class, but it'd be, so for example, it could be that there's 20 students across the university which are from a minoritized grouping. They will also come to that and bring others which perhaps are their allies. You notice we haven't used the word ally, because I get very concerned whether it's ally, whether it's white saviours. So all of that, I think, helps to really kind of engage with that. So coming back to the question, it really is how you promote the grouping so they're not silos. And also, if I want to sit with my colleague here, I can sit with my colleague and talk about whatever I want to talk about. And you might say, well, why are they sitting together? Is she LGBTQ plus? Is she isn't? But you don't know whether my ex-husband's gay or my daughter might be, or whoever. You have no idea what my interests are. And so I want to be able to connect with whoever I want to connect with. But at the same time, enabling students, if you're looking at students, to be able to formulate their own grouping, but through the fact that the policies enable them to be who they want to be and not being discriminated against. And I think that's a key thing as well. And I wanted to say one last thing, which is if you want to do any reading, and none of us have said anything about this, but I've got 2 publications which I'd like to say. And one is called Visible, Invisible, Black Women in Higher Education, that came out in June. And the other one is Understanding and Managing Sophisticated and Everyday Racism. It's a conceptual piece, but it kind of connects with a lot of the discussion we've had today. So I hope you didn't think I was being too pompous by doing that. But,
no.
You know, men always
Thanks
do
a lot. No, it wasn't. And we need to get through more reading and more nuanced understanding on these uncomfortable issues that also entails power relations among us. So thanks again to all our great panelists.